I'm Scott Anthony. I am the author of Smoke, Confessions of a Cuban Cigar Smuggler, and I am Chattin with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Scott Anthony.
I was caught on January 18th, 1987, pre-guidelines, so the guidelines hadn't taken effect yet, and I was caught by the FBI January 19th, 1992. 5 years and a day. So my case was almost fucking solved when they got me, and then I had federal gun charges and I had counterfeit money charges. I had been involved in counterfeiting, and I was bringing a lot of guns from South Florida because they were easy to get.
Yeah.
And I was bringing them back to Chicago and selling them, and I had my hands in everything. When you're a criminal, it's like a magnet. You know, it's attracted all the other underworld figures. They know that you guys can make money together.
So you run from the cops in Georgia, you get away 5 years later, and one day you get
5 years and
caught.
1 day.
Do they charge you with the car?
Of course. I'm caught in Mexico. The federales landed a helicopter in the middle of the street. There were about 50 of them. And they put a bag over my head, and between a couple of these and a couple of those, 3 days of no eating. They caught me giving a kickboxing class, so I had kicking pants on. When they locked me up in the Mexican cell, 5-star luxury beauty. Think of a Mexican cell in 1992. And they took that thing, so my pants were constantly falling down. And they took me to the border like any movie you've seen. And you meet at the middle of the border, and they hand me over to the other people, took the hood off of my head. And I was so happy to be in U.S. custody. I almost kissed the agents because they had starved me. And worse than an animal. You treat it worse than an animal. And then I took the tour in the U.S. So I went to all the different towns, Dallas and Houston, and they just keep bringing you back. I was on a federal shipping, but it was a private company that ran out of Tennessee. So you were in this van and you were hooked to the floor. And I always kept looking around and thinking, fuck, if we have an accident, we're fucked. And a couple years later, like 15 prisoners died in one of those vans from that company because there's no way of getting them out. The windows are gated. You're just like the Fed system where you got the chain around your waist, you're handcuffed, you got the chain to the handcuffs around your ankles, and then you're bolted to the floor. It was miserable.
Can you imagine if it fell into a river or a lake or something?
That's all I kept thinking. I have fucking PTSD because of it. And it was brutal because I kept thinking the driver and the passenger, the guards, they're getting out because they're not locked in a cage. But we're in a cage. Nobody's getting us out. Nobody's coming and risking their life for us. And so it took a long time to finally get me there. And then they pulled up in Georgia. And then when I thought I was getting out of Georgia, that's when the feds came to get me. So I did a total of about 2 years between what I was held there in the state and then the Fed time. I was in Atlanta Federal Prison. I was in the old El Reno, Oklahoma. I was in Chicago MCC, and I'll tell you something about prison. And you don't need more than 2 months to understand the whole thing. So whether you do 1 year or 75 years, it's just Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, well, the first year is this, and the second year and the fifth year is really good. When you're on your 28th year, now you have seniority. No, you are the same number from day one until the day you get out. The only difference is when you finally get adjusted in a prison, Now you can get some extras between the stamps and money and trading and some friend who gets you something out of the kitchen, etc. You might know the guards and have a fairly humane treatment because you're stable. But it's just I don't even know if you want to call it doing time. It's more like wasting time.
Boring. It's so boring.
That was the worst part for me. It's just I got to do something. I read books all day. I'd write. I'd be on the phone planning businesses. People used to laugh. They'd call me businessman. I just can't sit still.
Could have wrote a book then.
You know, I thought about it. The thought crossed my mind, but I was so secretive. I was hiding so many skeletons. I was so worried about everything I did. And I wasn't clean when I got out. So I got out in whatever it was, 92, 93, 94, got out in 94. And I still wasn't clean because all my friends were criminals. I had no money. So I go back out and now I'm mooching off all my friends and I'm looking at them and they're all doing great. They're all still rolling. And these are all the guys I set up, I taught, I schooled, I mentored, and they're all doing good. So I could have jumped right back into the gang at another level because now I had a lot of South American contacts. And I refused. I said, no, I had my tour duty. I enjoyed it all the way. I did it the best I could. I'm done. No more because then you get caught in that cycle and it's forever. Because I had already been in that forever cycle. I've been in every juvenile institution you had in Chicago. I've been arrested as a juvenile. Your fucking calculator probably couldn't add up all of the times I've been arrested. I know what being a criminal scumbag is. Nobody's going to tell me. And some people will say, yeah, listen to the way the guy talks. Believe me, I've changed everything about myself. So at that age, I guess I was 23 plus 5. I was 30 years old, right around 30, 31 years old. And I just kept saying no, but I was mooching. So like my guys that were rolling, I was staying at their house, using their car, getting some cash, they'd kick me back some money. And then I was still collecting. There were a few people that owed me money and I would show up at their door and knock with a smile and say, I'm not doing well. You owe me money. I don't want to hear any excuses. And so, I got a couple people to pay and I was looking for my road. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And I had made that choice that I'm not going to do it. So I had my gym and I got permission from the court because I had a job with a company selling souvenirs and shit. And so I could travel the world because I had to go to expos in China and all this stuff. And it was actually a front because a girl that I used to date owned the company. So she gave me the credentials. And so I just started doing that. Then I came back to Mexico and started building my gym, managing fighters, training fighters, giving martial arts classes. And that's when the cigars landed in my lap. So I had already had the street experience. That smuggling cigars wasn't new to me. The average person couldn't get out of bed today and say, you know what? I think I'm going to go and live in Mexico and fly to Cuba every other day and smuggle out boxes of cigars and take them all the way to the Rio Grande and have some drug mules, get them across the border. It was only possible because I had the other experience.
So
But
there's a lot of myths about Cuban cigars, like that they get you. They're made with.
There is no in Cuban cigars, but
that they're illegal in the U.S.
Now I'll have to explain this specifically. If you smoke a cigar, you can get sick, really sick. Like you would call it a bad high, not an enjoyable high. What they do to you is some people get nauseous, they vomit, they're dizzy and cold sweats and laying out on the street. That can be because you swallowed the smoke, you took in too much, you had an empty stomach. It could be that the cigar had mold. So sometimes if cigars are not taken care of carefully, they start to build mold, and now you're smoking the mold. and it's getting in your mouth and you're swallowing it. And I've had it. So I've been sick off of the cigars. And I used to bring, when I first started bringing cigars, I brought what they call street cigars. A lot of people don't know about this, but in Cuba, the factories are government owned. So the government owns the factory, and they own the sale of the cigars, but all the employees are stealing. So some of them are stealing the rings. Some of them are stealing the boxes. Some of them are stealing the cigars. And then somehow you've got makeshift factories and they're putting them together. All the employees know how to do it, and they're making $5 a month salary. So, you know, somebody else is paying them 50 cents to put together a box. They're like, great. So I had this incredible network of people that I bought street cigars. But the problem with the street cigars, I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna give you a little education. Here's my humidor behind me. You see that? My Habanos humidor. And
that's cool.
So here is a box of Cuban street cigars. It is exactly the same as any box, but you see there on the bottom, you see that stamp?
Yeah.
It's a rubber stamp, and it has codes and dates, and that identifies what factory produced this and the date it was produced. And because the Cuban street people do not give a shit what that stamp says, because the chances of me and you being able to decipher that code like this is not really common. So they'll sell you this. This is a box of Cuban cigars, but this stuff, this is not attached. No box leaves the factory without that attached. This is not attached. No box leaves the factory without it, but they're street cigars. So they are from Cuba, and they sometimes are absolutely outstanding. They can be great, and sometimes they can be questionable because the person who rolled them isn't a quality roller, because you have level 1 through 7. 7 is the top, and then you have 8 and 9. These are the best of the best. And so if you've got a level 1 roller rolling a cigar that's supposed to be rolled by a level 6, they might fuck it up.
Yeah.
And so the cigar won't pull, but they're still Cuban cigars. Staxx, I was in Cuba last week. You know what? Again, people can comment some shit, but the only way you build a life and build stories is by taking risks and adventure. And I'm not going to, how do I say this? I had a couple friends that are kind of pussies, and they told me, no, you can't go. Something bad can happen. I said, but that's when good stuff happens. And I said, when I called a friend of mine who's a Cuban American, by the way, shout out to William. William owns an amazing restaurant in Puerto Vallarta, Barcelona Tapas. And I called William and I said, hey, I'm going to Cuba. He's like, no, man, you can't go. It's dangerous over there. I've been talking to friends and family. And I said, William, I got my ticket. I sent it to him. He said, if you're going, I'm going with you. And he bought a ticket too. So he came with me, and I said, William, imagine this. And I'm not exaggerating, Staxx. I mean this. Imagine that we would have been in Havana when the U.S. invaded, like in Venezuela. What a amazing story you have if you survive it.
Yeah.
You know, the airplanes are going over and the Marines are on the beach. And I said, journalists do it all the time. Journalists are all over the world putting their life in peril. Why am I going to not go and have some adventure? So I got on the plane and I went to Havana and spent 4 days in Havana.
Now, is it illegal to have Cuban cigars in the U.S.?